Welcome to Ensemble.
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 Ensemble is and will always be a live learning experience, and now more than ever, a digital experience.
We created Ensemble as a live series.
And in each volume since then, we've invited thought leaders from across North America to share their insights and help form a conversation around a new and exciting topic.
This is our 12th volume, and we're focusing on the future of work.
As our world changes on a daily basis, it's important now more than ever for us to be asking questions, listening to as many voices as we can, sharing our knowledge, and coming together to work together and help each other. That's what we're about today.
So we want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
As we explore how people and businesses continue to find new ways to thrive and survive.
And now we're pleased to welcome our friend and host of Ensemble Volume 12, The Future of Work,
Amber Mack.
Welcome. On behalf of the entire team at Ensemble, I want to thank you for spending time with us today. Over the past couple of months, one question that has come up time and time again is, what is the future of work? We invite you to join the conversation live throughout the broadcast and join us for some special guests in the after show. Thanks for being here and welcome to the future of work.
Hi everyone, my name's Connor and I'm here from PwC to talk to you about the future of work. Over the next 5 minutes, I'm going to be introducing some key trends that are influencing how we work and offer some insight into how those trends may evolve over time. Throughout my presentation, you'll be seeing slides like this one from the movie Her, featuring movies that I love, and also movies that I believe offer an interesting perspective on how work gets done in the future. Now, the future of work. When people think about the future of work, they often focus on technology. They'll ask, what influence will automation and artificial intelligence or blockchain or VR or drones have on what I do, where I do it, and who I do it with? Now, while this is a logical starting point, the reality of how things are changing is much more complicated, drawing on a variety of trends across social, economic, environmental, and value-based dimensions. They're all coming together to redefine how we work, live, and play. These 5 trends listed on this slide are the mega trends that are reshaping our society, work included. Technology, changing demographics, rapid urbanization, resource scarcity and climate change, and most recently, the health crisis, COVID-19. Now, I don't think we'd have to stretch our minds very far to imagine a world where AR and VR allow employees to collaborate across great distances, where automation and robotics aid us by taking repetitive tasks off our plate, where AI and analytics give us deeper, faster, better, stronger insights than we have today. Technology gives us so many things. It raises productivity, living standards, and average lifespan. It improves our lives on a daily basis. It allows us to engage in conferences like this one. It also brings with it, though, the threat of social unrest and political upheaval if economic advantages are not shared equitably. Think about companies like the all too frequently cited Uber, worth $60 billion with only 20,000 employees, not the most effective distribution of wealth. And while I won't pretend to have an answer to this, I do love Bill Gates' idea of tax the robots, like Chappie. But as I said, it's not just technology that's driving change, right? Demographics are shifting. This is also playing a role. A new generation has arrived and mixing young employees with old employees. So when you look around the globe, with very few exceptions, the world's population is aging. And our longer lifespan is impacting things like business models, like career trajectories, healthcare, and pension costs. Older workers will need to learn new skills. They'll need to work for longer. So retooling will become the norm. Companies like PwC, as with many other organizations, have initiatives already that directly address this challenge. We offer intensive programs to candidates from across the company at all levels in all fields to retrain them in things like automation, analytics, and design over the course of a year. They then get to apply those skills to real client problems. Programs like this are critical to help employees stay aligned to the needs of the market, stay relevant as they age, and to grow their skills and interests. By 2030, the UN projects that 5 billion people live in cities. And already, many of the world's biggest cities have GDPs larger than mid-sized countries. So in the future, cities will have an important role to play as agents for job creation. But here's the thing about jobs in the city. They're city jobs. They're not scaled agriculture operations or heavy industry, at least not how it's currently conceived, which to me gives way to this image of the city as a consumer and the surrounding areas and global supply chains as producers, which kind of reminded me of Hunger Games, with District 1 being rich elites and then all the surrounding poorer districts just funneling resources and food towards that central node, which I don't think is a great future to work towards. So maybe it's something we should be conscious of as we reimagine what the future of work looks like. Now, demand for energy and water is also forecast to increase over the next 10 or so years, as much as 50% by 2030, which means new types of jobs in alternative energy, new engineering processes, product design, waste management, and reuse will all need to be created in order to deal with this changing climate and the limited resources that are going to start to manifest. Traditional energy industries and the millions of people employed by them will see rapid restructuring. So think Alberta, which prior to COVID-19 was projecting 25% unemployment for 2021. Climate change is also driving change in employee values. So it's not just about getting a paycheck anymore. Younger employees are seeking a higher purpose and meaning in the jobs that they select. So increasingly, this means taking on a social or an environmental cause that aligns more with personal values. And finally, we come to COVID-19. Over the past 3 months, COVID has completely redefined every aspect of our lives, including work. For those of us who are working through the crisis, I believe we've realized that you don't need the four walls of an office to be productive. We found ways to cope, to work from home, to run a conference from home, even to run the country from home. But this comes with a price, and that price is work-life balance. And while this struggle has existed before COVID-19, it has become more apparent recently, the line more blurred. I see this on my daily video conferences with colleagues and their dogs and their kids and their unkempt homes on full display for me and everyone else in the office to see. Now, the typical blue-suited consultant instead sports a beard, a hat, a hoodie, looking like you caught him on a Sunday afternoon. So what does this mean as things start back up, right? What will we carry with us as we go back to the office? Will we go back? How frequently will we go back? What will our commutes look like? Will public transit still be a thing? What about handshakes? What happens to open concept offices? What happens to all the real estate that's right now being held with companies around the world that they will no longer use if their employees are going to be remoting in? So, to recap, these are the drivers that are changing the way we work. Technological breakthroughs, demographic shifts, rapid urbanization, resource scarcity and climate change, and COVID-19. And although it seems like there's a lot of challenge embedded in those trends that are ahead of us, I believe that the future of the work is bright. Because even if we face robots or climate change or GTA that has been subdivided into districts like in Hunger Games, we as people are creative. We can find new ways to do things. So if there's something about work that sucks or could be better or needs fixing, I say try to fix it. Propose a solution. Build something. If your bosses don't listen, leave if you care enough about it. Start your own thing. Run your own shop how you want to run it if you're so inclined. In short, the future of work is up to us to define. How do you want to work? I, for one, want my work to be meaningful, flexible, inclusive, and collaborative. And what I hope I conveyed during my talk, more fun. Thank you.
My name is Murray Simpson. I am the inventor of societal networks and the founder of Citizen, the first societal network. I'm honored to have been invited to share my thoughts on the future of work tonight. Wars and pandemics have shaped the nature of work before. The 20th century, for instance, saw government taxation on earned income to address social inequality. These programs were called social programs, and they lifted an entire generation out of poverty by creating a healthier, better educated, and more productive workforce. In a post-pandemic world, governments will have substantially less capital available to fund new needs. And make no mistake, needs are growing. Who then will fund them? Well, turns out we will, but not through taxation. We will build societal networks instead. So, what are societal networks, and why do they change work as we know it? First, they shift us all towards ownership of wealth-creating assets rather than simply having a job. But don't worry, you'll still have a regular job. Your signing up and use of societal networks is your side gig. It's just kind of there. It's on your phone. You participate daily. Your reward for doing so is a huge quantity of money that becomes available because your work generates data sets that are very valuable. The societal network that you own then sells that data for profit. The profits fund whatever needs your society has. And the best part, you choose what it's spent on. Work plus ownership is the future of work. Enjoy the show.
When we're talking about the future of work, the perfect person to speak to is Mitch Joel, who is all about decoding the future, whether it's through his podcasts or speaking events. Hello, Mitch. Thanks for being here.
It's great to be here, and with the lack of speaking events, this makes it pretty easy to see you.
Well, we did something a little bit differently than we would typically do with an interview like this. We're actually going to interview each other, and so we prepared 3 questions each. I'm going to start, and I had a chance to go into the Mitch Joel Ambermac archives, and I found an interview we did in 2013, and I'd asked you about your book, Control, Alt, Delete, and I asked you the question, how do you stay employable over the next 5 years? And I have the same question for you today in 2020 during COVID-19.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw that question, I thought maybe that's not a fair question to start with, Amber. Why are you going instead of a jab? You're just right hooking me. Look, I think ultimately what we're seeing right now is just this real digitization of everything. People are in it, they're using it, and they're there. And I think any opportunity to think that way still holds true. One of the great things about the book, I think at least, is that, while platforms might have changed, I think the sentiment rings even truer today than it did back then, because we are here. We're in this moment. We've got our elderly on Zoom and connected through FaceTime, and we've got the young kids all on screens all day, unfortunately, but for school, hopefully. So I just think that it is still that course of thinking digital first, thinking mobile first. It still rings true for me, and I think we're just all experiencing it right now. So for me, my follow-up to that was, can you talk a little bit about the influencer space and how the influencer changes in a world where all of us are now doing this and all of us are creating so much content? Do you think that influencers are still going to be as powerful? Do you think it's going to change?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think, unfortunately, when we talk about the word influencers, Kim Kardashian has kind of ruined it for everybody, because there are people who are influential, who are doing great work in the knowledge economy. And so I think what we're going to see over the next few months is those people who truly have influence, who have communities online, who can make an impact. Those people are really going to rise to the top, because as you know, and as we've all been doing lately, we're doing these live events. And at the end of the day, not everybody can do live. I mean, people can go do a photo shoot and make themselves look wonderful, but not everybody can do live video. And that's where I think there's going to be a widening in terms of the people who kind of rise to the top. And I think live video will be that differentiator. So the influencers, I think, during this time are those people who are helping to guide people through this crisis. And that's a different type of influence than maybe if I could sell you a new sweater. Mitch, we have lots of people who are like us, who are speaking at events, doing so virtually now, who write books, who do podcasts. We're all part of the knowledge economy. When we talk about the future of work, what does this look like when we have to be physically distant?
This is probably the million-dollar question that we're all struggling with. And for me, I don't know that we're going to get to the answer. And to a certain degree, what I keep saying is we have to hold sort of these two things in our heads at the same time. This one idea that things are going to be forever changed and different, and that this will pass, and we will literally be in a place where we sort of look at this and go, wow, remember 2020? That was crazy. It was bizarre. And we're sort of back to normal. But I think within this, what we're seeing is that there are many different levels. Like even as we record this, you've been doing TV and broadcast for so much longer than I have. You have your reps in, you've got the studio, you're looking great. The whole thing is set up, it's mic'd well. I'm fumbling through this. I'm trying to figure it out. While I've done digital communications for over a decade, this format and this type of broadcasting has really changed who I am and how we deliver. So I think it's more about just the mass amount of things we're going to be seeing produced and how we think about where the real value is, and also figuring out if it's a world where, you know, when we switched from sort of print to digital, there was sort of this digital pennies idea, like digital is so free and fast flowing, that is there any value in that? And so I think we're going to have to figure that out. And speaking of that, I'm wondering what your perspective is on this. Like, as we see digital delivering, is it the same for you as physical? Like live events to doing Facebook events are very different for me. Books to webinars, like really different for me. So is this like the old days of print to digital, where the physical dollars are just going to be replaced with virtual pennies? Like, how do you see this rolling out?
I think, honestly, that's a question that all of us are asking right now. And I've been thinking about this a lot as we do more in this space in terms of online events. And what's happening right now is everybody is working for free in the digital space, and that can't last forever. And so I liken it in some ways to the early days of the app ecosystem. And I think of apps when they first came out, they were all free, and nobody thought anyone would ever pay for an app. That was ridiculous. These were just tiny little programs you would download on your phone. And what we've realized as the app ecosystem matured is that people would pay for that premium experience, but it's not $25, it's $1.99 or 99 cents. And I do believe that in terms of those physical experiences in the virtual space, they are going to be obviously less expensive for people to come to these virtual events. And then at the end of the day, what you really need is someone who is out there, who is speaking or doing any type of content, is that you need scale. Because you need scale, because if we know when Facebook turns on that switch where you can charge for a live event, you know you're not going to be charging $50, but you might be able to charge $5. And so I think that's where things become really interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be about having the list and the people and the connections while this happens, and they want to stay with you for sure. It's a whole different landscape for sure.
It's a whole different landscape. Okay, so speaking about that whole different landscape, one of the pieces of that is so critical is the technology that all of us are using right now. Or like you say, you know, many people fumbling through, trying new things, myself included. It's all about experimenting. And what I think is really interesting is that there's some technology that we're depending on more and more. So my question for you is, what tech do you think is going to be that technology that will accelerate or grow during this difficult time?
I think we've already seen it. It's become the #1 company in Canada. They've had massive growth. I'm very proud that I know the founders and friends with Harley Finkelstein, but I think Shopify is going to definitely be the one that we're going to see impact us all, from the sort of small local merchants to the medium sized to the larger players. I think it's going to impact on the B2B side, on the B2C side. I think it's going to impact even those selling virtual products. I just think that we have really thought differently about what buying is versus what shopping is. And when I look at the technology landscape out there, I think Shopify has really positioned itself, along with their marketplace, with their shop app and other components of it, that really creates a vital connection between all of us and each other. And that idea of commerce, I really think is powerful. I've been talking about the idea of social commerce for over 10 years, but to really see the ability for a small local merchant to have the same ability to reach as an Amazon was a massive tectonic shift. And we're seeing it now in the sort of sub 15% of all commerce is e-commerce. And now in the past couple of months, it's been like 30% plus. Will it go back? Probably. But I still think that the impact of Shopify and what they're providing is going to be one of the technologies that we will always think about around this time. I'm curious, I throw it right back to you for my final question, which would be, what do you think is the technology that we're going to be sort of catering to in a world where we've all started using everything en masse?
Well, something I've been talking about for the past couple of years is artificial intelligence, and the adoption has been really slow, as I'm sure you know, and there's only been a few companies that have been able to successfully adopt artificial intelligence. But what we've seen, I think, during this crisis is that more of these companies are moving more quickly. And I'm thinking specifically about other countries. In Singapore is one example where they're currently using robot dogs powered by AI through parks to warn people about physically distancing, and computer vision so that they're able to see that you are in fact 6 feet apart. I'm thinking about the customer call centers where they were told that they can't be in these call centers stacked side by side, that are quickly adopting things like chatbots. So I think we're going to see that AI adoption is going to accelerate, and I think there are going to be those companies that successfully figure out how to adopt that technology, and then many others that get left behind. It's not a pretty scene, though, I think, when you talk about the future of work, because the disruption can be so difficult for so many people, and for many people in jobs that are going to be affected by that AI or automation as well.
And we're also going to see it impact cities. You think about people who had smaller condos or apartments because they were spending more time at work, who may now only work a couple of days a week or work remotely. I think they're going to move to areas where they have more space and land, and that's going to just impact everything we built over several decades to get to these sort of interesting infrastructures. So the whole dynamic of it, I think, is going to be impacted. And I think that the marriage of AI with this sort of Shopify commerce component of it is it's the perfect fit, which is appropriate because you and I sort of get along and often think alike. So that's great.
It's perfect. And I just wanted to thank you for joining me in this conversation. I have to say, one of the first times I saw you speak, it was a model for me in terms of saying, okay, you know what? I think I can do this. I understand this guy. I love his presentations. They're so engaging. One of the first videos I saw you show was the free hugs video from way back when. And you have always been at the forefront, really, in terms of figuring out the future. So before I let you go, I just want you to remind people where they can go to listen to your podcast, to read your email newsletter. Where can they find all things Mitch Joel?
Well, that's very kind of you, Amber. And you know it's always been a mutual admiration society. So watching your ascent in the broadcasting space and the speaking space, I dare say that you've lapped me in the speaking space. So very well done. You can find me always at 6pixels.com, and you can just sign up for everything, my weekly podcast, tons of articles and information. And hopefully soon in a hotel conference center. I'd love to see that happen again soon. So thanks again, Amber.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I will chat with you soon.
Hi, Ensemblers. My name is Aalum Jaffer. I'm a manager of strategy at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. Today we'll be chatting about the future of work. So for me, going into COVID was never more uncertain on the future of work. You know, our day-to-day changed drastically when the NHL, NBA, and MLS seasons all went on pause. And me working in brand partnerships in particular, you know, our life took a notable shift from considering how we were going to help brands activate around sport to the culture of sport, and really changing the focus of their communication to community impact, fan engagement, and entertainment. You know, it's been an incredible pivot. I know what's kind of surprised me most about it was really the determination of our team. You know, in the last 9 weeks, we've built bespoke marketing opportunities for 20 plus brands that we work with while making a really meaningful impact in the community. And it's been truly humbling to see so many people work together toward a shared purpose without ever actually getting to interact in person. You know, we've embraced remote working, and in my opinion, it's not going anywhere. I think working remotely will be a new global standard for companies aspiring to create a culture that ultimately serves their people. That's my tidbit. Thank you, Ensemble. You're part of something bigger.
Hey, good folks at Ensemble. I was asked for my thoughts on the future of work, and I just wanted to share three quick sound bites. The first is, I think the future of work is all about being flexible. So that is where you work, how you communicate, be it over Zoom, over email, or good old-fashioned phone call, which I'm a fan of. I think flexibility is going to be a key component of the future of work. The second thing is that I've really learned over the last little while is checking in on people. I don't think it's exclusively about mental health, though I think that's a key component. I think building remote teams and checking in on people and make sure that you care for them and they know you care for them is really important. And then the last point is, I think there's going to have to be an increased level of trust. If we are remote, if work is going to be flexible, we're just going to have to trust our teammates to get things done. Thanks so much.
Hey everyone, my name is Saleem Haniff, mental health and well-being leader and advocate in education and founder of educatedstyle.ca. So what does the future of work look like for me? Well, I think the future of work in general is being more entrepreneurial, based on your passions and abilities, and for sure having at least a few online offerings. For instance, educatedstyle.ca began with my passion for men's style and my ability to help guys find the confidence that they've always had through expressing their own personal style. Moving this online, at least for the time being, could be the future of this type of work. Teaching the upcoming generation to think critically, to problem solve, to be creative and be flexible, to communicate effectively are the type of core competencies that I think will move the world of work forward, not just our credentials. However, I guess there's an irony in what I'm saying. I'm sure you've heard the phrase before, do what you love, and you would never have worked a day in your life. So the future of work in essence could be no work, as all of us, or many of us, could be pursuing things that we're good at and that we love, not just doing things that we think we need to do to earn a living. In terms of what surprised me the most, there's been this perception, I think, that working from home or online will make us less productive or lazy. But in many ways, I've still been able to stay connected and to be even more productive than usual. So that's been pretty cool. Offering online or phone consultations or counseling, Zoom calls with key stakeholders, things like that. I think we're learning more to be significantly more adaptable and flexible, which I think is always great. Ensemble, you're part of something bigger.
Daughter is an graduating high school senior, incoming freshman. Her school system, Cal State University, has just decided that all things are going to be virtual, at least for the first half of the year. And so, what does a college student, what does a young person do? And in the good news or the bad news is it's going to be harder to find a job, internships, et cetera, et cetera. The good news is that that's going to be universal. So it's not going to be like there's a rising tide and all my friends have jobs at Goldman Sachs for the summer and Accenture for the summer and Apple and Google and Facebook. But I'm the loser who can't get an internship. No one's going to get an internship. So I think what you have to do is you have to kind of, like I told my daughter, you call up this company that she interned with last year called Merge 4. Merge 4 makes the best socks in the world. And I said, call up the CEO, she's probably laying people off and furloughing, and say you will work for free because you don't care. It's going to be just so much better to say after this pandemic is under control that, my entire college experience was changed because I registered, but I was taking classes online. So I didn't just take classes online and, sit around and make TikToks the rest of the day. I also had an internship at Merge 4 running Merge 4's or managing or doing Merge 4's social media. So I had on-the-job experience while I was getting a virtual education during a pandemic. That's a pretty good story, right?
Absolutely.
So I think if you're young and, I wish I had a magic way to say, okay, so this is how you can make money. But I don't. But at least when someone looks at your LinkedIn profile 2 or 3 years from now, it would be better to stand out by saying, not only was I getting an education in terms of education, but I was also getting a real world education by having this experience. So I am more qualified than people who just sat around and played Fortnite all day.
Absolutely. I mean, it really brings up another question I have for you, which is about the future of work. We've seen companies like Twitter announce that people may be able to work from home forever within that organization. How do you think COVID-19 is going to change the workplace?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fundamental change. in people's expectations as well as companies. Now, I don't know how to predict what that change is, but I think that many people are saying, wow, I got back 2 hours a day in my life. And, wow, I didn't have to have, like, we're having 0 face-to-face analog meetings right now, right? And it used to be that you thought, oh, yeah, well, so generally I have to have a face-to-face meeting. It's more effective, eye contact and blah, blah, blah. But, well, lo and behold, Zoom works even without a llama. And so I think people's expectations of what can be done remotely and online are going to be much, much higher. And I also think that companies will notice, and it'd be interesting to see when companies do an analysis to say, okay, so the downside was, maybe less social interaction. The upside was, well, we have now less office space. We need less parking lots. We need less free food in the cafeteria. Employees are happier because they get 2 hours a day back in their lives from commuting. So they were more productive. We were more productive. Now, if you're Apple and you're a hardware company, what do you do? I mean, do certain iPhone hardware engineers take home the secret iPhone prototype that's, iPhone 15 and, then their kid picks it up one day and does a TikTok and say, yeah, my father works at Apple and here's the new iPhone 15. Well, okay, that's one more termination. But I think it's all going to be changed.
Hi, welcome to Sports Trivia Genius. I'm Sandy Jobin Bevins from the Norman Howard team. Hello, you Ensemble people. I'm glad to see you're ensembling out there tonight for Volume 12, The Future of Work. What does Sports Trivia Genius have to do with the future of work? Well, you're going to do a little bit of trivia work right now. The theme tonight is going to be baseball, and more specifically, our beloved Toronto Blue Jays, because we miss baseball right now. We miss being out there at the game, getting a beer and a hot dog, don't we? All right, so in true Sports Trivia Genius fashion, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. Each question is going to get a little more difficult. We'll get you to answer those up there on the chat board. And then at the end of the evening, I'll come back and let you know who won, who got the most right. And we're going to do a charitable donation in your name just for doing that. All right, let's get down to some Sports Trivia Genius action. The category, of course, is Toronto Blue Jays. And this is the rookie question. Who is the only Jays player to hit 4 home runs in a game? Who was that player? A lot of options out there. All right, this is the pro level. All right. Which Jays pitcher was on the mound for the final out of the 1992 World Series? That was the first one, just to help you out, not the 93, because you know how that ended. Mitch Williams of the Phillies was on the mound where that ended. But who was on the mound for the Blue Jays in 1992 when they won their first World Series? And here is the All-Star question. All right. At 28 games, which player has the longest consecutive hit streak in Jays history? This is a pretty challenging one. That's why it's the All-Star level. All right. Enjoy the rest of your ensemble. I'll be back a little bit later on to give you the answers and see who won here on Sports Trivia Genius, the Ensemble edition.
My name is Carly Heffernan, and I am the creative director at the Second City in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And when everyone thinks of Second City, they think comedy theater. And yes, we absolutely love to laugh, and we love when our audience laughs with us. But we're also a house of satire, which means we take a look at the world around us, and then we put it up on stage, or in today's world, on screen. Yes, because the world around us is wild. It's a global pandemic. And when we found ourselves within that pandemic back in March, we did what Second City does best. We improvised. One of the main tenets of improv is, of course, play the scene you're in. And we're in a world of physical distancing now, and our safety and the safety of everyone around us is our number one priority. So we moved our entire business online, our entire training center, all of our shows, they are all now online. And while it was challenging, it's also been extremely rewarding. There are so many silver linings to doing this, to having this innovation. That's where Yes And comes in. We yes anded the idea of moving online, and then all of a sudden the positives came back at us. We are now sharing our comedy with over 1,000 people every single time we do a show. That's more than we could fit into any of our theaters. And those audiences are coming to us from over 40 different countries. Last week we had an amazing mother and daughter join us from Colombia. And our training centers are now finally open to people who are not just from Toronto and Chicago and Los Angeles. So you can now learn with the world famous Second City from absolutely anywhere in the world. Again, these are the positives. These are the silver linings that we have found in all of this. To be honest, we had a show a couple of weeks ago where we invited an audience member up on screen, and she joined us from her bathtub. It was amazing and hilarious, and it never would have happened if we were still live on stage in our theater, because I think it's illegal.
Hey there, I'm David Brown, and that is Libby Begg, and we are part of The Message.
We want to get to know you, our audience, a little bit better. So we've decided to sit down 2-on-1 and pepper you with silly and serious questions while you tell us about your favorite vice. Could be a piece of chocolate or a midday drink. It is quarantine after all.
Our first episode, we spoke with Joseph Benici, who's the creative director at Ben Simon Byrne. And we're pretty sure that a lot of you will understand and appreciate his lockdown vice of choice.
So sit back and enjoy. This is Advice.
Hi there, my name is Joseph Benici, and this is my advice.
Speaking of vices, I have a video that we'll be able to see on The Message, but you and I like to share a particular vice. Tell us a little bit about what you like to be doing in your spare time these days.
I find after like 10 hours of meetings that I really need a cocktail. I love something called a Churchill, a Winston Churchill martini, and that is essentially gin, just shaken on ice, a really nice London dry, and you typically put a bit of vermouth in a gin, whether you want it dry or not very dry. But a Winston Churchill actually has zero vermouth in it. But you actually have a bottle of vermouth somewhere in the room, and you look at it as you're shaking, but you actually never use it.
Well, guys, I'm going to leave you for a second. I've got another really important meeting that I have to get to, but I will come back, and maybe I'll have a drink with me. Who knows?
We're actually going to start right at the beginning, quite literally at the beginning. What were you into as a kid?
I was super quiet. I was super, super quiet. I was like, the silent kid who came to the party and didn't really say much. I'm very much an introvert. I think I was back then. I still am right now. So this, the pandemic actually hasn't really impacted my social life that much. That's the joke with my partner.
Is there a personality or a trait or a quality about yourself that you think that you look back now and think that that's who you were as a young person, and that's what brought you to this industry?
I'm pretty relentless in terms of like when I set my sights on something and care about something, that's all I care about, and then once that's fixed, or once that problem's solved, or once it's the end, then I can kind of move on.
When you're trying to crack a problem in the agency or your brief, do you want to sit in a room with other people and shoot out ideas and throw things on the wall, or you want to sit alone and just sort of ruminate and figure it out on your own?
I had to kind of learn to actually create a different version of myself for advertising, because you're constantly presenting your ideas, and being a total introvert actually doesn't work in this industry. I think you have to be social.
Have you given much thought to how the industry might change coming out of this, what we're in right now, lockdown and quarantine and a terrible disease?
I haven't given much thought to it because I don't think you can think about what this is going to be like in a year, because I think it changes every 2 weeks. I think it's a really rare collective experience that the world is having right now.
Is there a trend in the industry that you would love to see more of, or a trend in the industry that you would hate to see less of?
I think the trend I would love to see more of, and this is whether it's a pandemic or not, is just a return to try to make people laugh. in this business with what we do, and at the same time connect with the product or brands that we're trying to make a connection with. My next goal is just to create the next hilarious campaign that people love and talk about and makes them laugh and makes them forget about stuff for a while and gets them talking.
Joseph, do you feel ready? I am not really a journalist, as David likes to sort of regularly remind me, but do you feel ready to answer my questions?
100%, you can fire them away.
First question, very important. Hash browns or French fries?
Oh, French fries, like 100%.
What would be your dream car?
I don't have a dream car because I don't have a license. I have never sat behind a steering wheel in my entire life.
Would you rather be able to fly or make yourself invisible? But the catch is you can't actually control when those things happen.
Definitely fly.
Okay.
I don't really see the advantages of being invisible other than snooping on people.
It'd be creepy.
It's super creepy. Yeah, I think being invisible is like super creepy, but flying, there's nothing creepy about flying.
Now, if you were to go to an amusement park, would you be more excited about the food or the rides?
The rides, for sure.
Last question.
Yeah.
What is a compliment that you'd most like to receive?
A great compliment would be if people know me as a nice person to work with, a friend, confidant, whatever interaction I have with them is that I'm always kind of kind to them. That to me would be the highest compliment.
Thank you so much for doing this with us. And
you're welcome.
We really appreciate it.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
The optimist in me sees the future of work as bright. A world where work-life balance is actually achievable rather than some grand illusion. I see a future with less time spent in cars, less time wasted in mind-numbing meetings. I see where efficiency is going to dominate rather than face time. The definition of workplace is changing. I have been surprised at how adaptive we've been to change once change was no longer an option. And as workplace is now defined not just to include our physical office, but also our homes and outdoor space, so too will our expectations in terms of how we align our workplace and culture, brand, and our ability to attract and retain talent. Ensemble, you're part of something bigger.
Hey everybody, Stephen Brown, CEO of Fuse Create. The future of our business at Fuse post-COVID comes down to 4 simple facts: focus, teams, agility, and financials. Around focus, stay the course of what you're amazing at. For us, it's delivering inventive and creative campaigns that connect brands with consumers. Number 2, get as close as you can to your teams and your clients, of course, without crossing any awkward lines. This is a people business. During times of crisis, they want to see you lead. They want to see you support. Basically, be good people. Number 3, be nimble and be agile. Slow never wins, but right now, slow is death. Fix your processes, make things faster, and pivot. And 4, watch your financials, especially your cash, incredibly closely. Not only do you need to get through COVID in healthy standing, you need to be in good shape to take advantage of the opportunities on the other side. And there will be lots. That's it. It's not rocket science. Be smart, be fast, and be safe. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Ben Feist. I'm a software engineer and I work at Johnson Space Center in Houston.
Leading up to the ignition sequence.
Apollo in Real Time is essentially just a website, but it allows you to experience the Apollo missions as they happened. You get to be a fly on the wall and witness it as though you were there in the room in mission control.
CDR and LMP, panel 6 and 9, pad count off. 50 seconds and count. Pad count going off. And my pad count going off, sure. Ignition sequence starts.
This was something I did just because I wanted to do it. Anytime I found anything about walking on the moon, I would think it was just amazing. In 1996 or so, I came across a website that pulled the transcripts over a dial-up modem onto my computer And suddenly I'm reading everything that they did on the Apollo missions. And I thought, this is amazing. It was the most rich, detailed content that I could possibly have fathomed about the topic. And that is the material that I eventually turned into Apollo in real time. I've worked in advertising and marketing for the last 25 years. I've worked at different agencies. I run the technology department at some of them. And when I'd go home at night, I would unwind by working on historical Apollo data. This wasn't a project I was doing for anybody else except myself. So it had no deadline. And for a long time, I didn't even tell anybody what I was doing. So as a hobby, it was really exciting and energizing to work on it. To do that is a big step. And I took the step quite late, to be honest. It took me a long time to realize that I could do something if I wasn't being paid to do it, I'm embarrassed by that now that I realize I remember thinking things like, geez, I wish I worked for that other agency that just got NASA as a client. Like, how wrong-headed. You could just work on it anyway. There's no reason that you can't. And someone at NASA said, we think that this thing that you've done might be the answer to how we should manage our mission data for future missions. Do you want to help us with that problem? And I couldn't believe what they were saying. I thought I was on Candid Camera or something like that. But I think it's really important to be doing something that's for you. And I wasn't trying to see if I could get a job at NASA, certainly not for the period when I was just working up for my own.
6, 5.
Working in NASA in that environment is very different than working in the private sector. How the people in mission control work with the crews and how the crews communicate with each other. There's a super efficiency to what they're saying to each other. It translates into every meeting that happens. Everybody knows why they're in the meeting. Everybody knows what they're good at and knows what their blind spots are. This is something everybody can learn in every company is this diligence around knowing what people's responsibilities are and giving people the empowerment to actually do things that are in the purview of their responsibilities is very important. And, if the second baseman makes the play, that's the second baseman's play. There's not everybody else needs to tell the second baseman how to do it, because that's truly a measure in how communication should be done between people who are working together towards a common goal. See if you can challenge yourself to only speak up in the next meeting if it's something that you know you're an expert in. The average age on Apollo 13 was 27 years old. Jerry Griffin is one of the flight directors from that era. And he said that the reason it worked to have such young people in mission control is that was an era when decision-making was pushed down the hierarchy. Instead of always boiling up any important decision to the top, if an important decision could be made more quickly by the person who's more qualified at the bottom, then do it. For example, the Apollo 13 suffered an explosion on board that almost killed the crew and they almost didn't make it home. They reached a point where they went, so many things are wrong right now, we're not going to be able to land on the moon. This is within less than an hour after the explosion. And the person that made that call was 31 years old. You as a CEO of a small startup might be looking for that day when you sell the company, and that might be what gets you out of bed every day. But everybody else is there to make something, and you have to make sure that you get the right people that are interested in doing that. It's the process that's the key, not the end result.
Ben Feist, thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you online and stay in touch with you?
Sure, you can find me. I think the best way to get in touch is on Twitter, and I'm Ben Feist on Twitter. And also, I hope you check out the website at apolloinrealtime.org.
Thank you so much for your time. And as they say, Godspeed.
Thanks very much.
We are so lucky to have our next guest, who is the CEO and president of the Economic Club of Canada. Rhiannon Rosalind is here to talk about the future of work and what's in store.
My name's Riya Roseland, and I am the President and CEO of the Economic Club of Canada. The global pandemic has, of course, impacted our organization and operation. We are a live events-driven organization that typically does over 100 events a year across Canada. We normally gather senior-level business executives together with politicians, heads of state, economists, to talk about the most important issues of the day. Our business is driven by not only the content of what the special guest speakers share on the podium, but also that connection in the room, being able to be in the room with a senior diplomat, being able to sit at the table with a C-suite executive and make that networking connection. That's always what's driven revenue for us. So, of course, we know that the shift is going to digital, but how do you maintain that opportunity to generate revenue in a digital landscape now that, to be quite honest, has shifted very quickly? It's looking to that subscription-based membership model. We as a society, we as, businesses have been operating on autopilot. We've been walking around with the blinders on and not really anticipating as much as we should have been the shifts and the threats that were surrounding us as an economy that could actually disrupt things like this. There was many signals and signs pointing to an erosion of that model. When we think about more people transitioning to working from home, more people being able to actually digitally plug into work, what that looks like is, large office towers in the middle of downtown that don't need to be used perhaps in the same way that they once were. So it's really rethinking our actual physical infrastructure and also our economic infrastructure. I think the biggest mistake that we could make right now as a country, as an economy, is to actually go back to normal.
I'm Nick Drew, CEO of Fuse Insights. The future of work, I think, has two big trends. The obvious one is the rise of working from home, not just during lockdown, but as a permanent expectation. The second trend we're seeing, I think, is in how companies approach staffing. And we're seeing in the research industry, at least, that even big firms want to be more nimble and able to staff up and down on a project-by-project basis, or in response to external shocks like coronavirus. So there's a shift away from relying just on permanent full-time employees, and there's greater reliance on contractors and freelancers. What's really interesting is that these are very familiar trends to small businesses, to startups and entrepreneurs. Small business is all about not having an office and working from home. And we're well versed in scaling up and down rapidly with freelancers, contractors and peers. So I think it's fair to say that the future of work is more freelancing, more working from home, more Zoom calls, and of course, more business and home casual. Ensemble, you're part of something bigger.
Hello, Ensemble 12. I'm Mike Downie, and I'm a filmmaker. I've done films such as Secret Path, The Hockey Nomad, and my kids like to introduce me with their favorite film of mine, Nuts About Squirrels. Perhaps the greatest squirrel documentary ever made. The future of work, the future of production. I can tell you, I've got a film in development right now, a documentary film. We hope to shoot it this summer. If it goes ahead, the plans are that we will do, it'll have a lot of interviews in it. It is about COVID, of course. It will have more talking heads than what we would normally do. They'll be framed quite tightly. We'll be working with local crews, so we won't obviously be sending anybody on flights. I will do the interviews with video conferencing. So we'll set up some kind of, we'll have the camera, and right beside we'll have the iPad or whatever, and I'll have eyeline with the interviewee. And perhaps we can get out with a crew to do some of the more local interviews. And of course, we'll be traveling separately and doing that. The easy part for film production will be the editing, post-production. Typically an editor sitting in a dark room by themselves and then sending cuts to director and producer. Listen, thanks very much for having me, and for all of you working, hang in there. I do have one bit of advice for everybody, either at work or at home, and that is ducks. Kids love them. They're pretty cute. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Joining me now to have a conversation about the future of work is the Executive Director of the League of Innovators. It's Joanna Buchkaska-McCumber, who is joining us from Victoria, British Columbia. Hello, Joanna.
Hello, Amber.
So
great to be here.
Tell us exactly what the League of Innovators is and what you do.
For sure. So League of Innovators is a national Canadian charity that empowers young people to be their own bosses in their lives and their careers. And how we do that is we offer accessible programs through a blended model of online and offline programming for young people between the ages of 15 to 25. And how we talk about it is that we do that from discovery to acceleration, really trying to democratize the concept of entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurial mindset. So young people across this country are able to learn these skills and these tools and bring them into their lives.
It's really interesting when we talk about the next generation, and I'm curious your perspective. Is the next generation just creatively inclined and interested in becoming entrepreneurs, or does the marketplace demand that of them?
So it's really interesting to look at that question and see what's happening in the world. And what we're actually seeing is declining numbers of startups popping up, even though the concept of entrepreneurship and the idea of an entrepreneur or successful entrepreneur is becoming more and more mainstream. But what we're seeing at the same time, even those numbers are decreasing while, in the media, the concept is becoming much more popular, is that young people are becoming more entrepreneurial in the sense that they're seeking out new ways of learning, new ways of doing things, new ways of solving problems, new ways of connecting with each other. And so in a sense, they're becoming more entrepreneurial in their own rights and in the way that they want to connect and in the way they want to build the world. And so what we're seeing is young people, we're seeing numbers of about 65% of young people that are in high school starting out their own little side hustles, whether that's a new Instagram channel or a TikTok channel. And so they're starting to get into this mode of creating their own entities, their own projects that aren't necessarily within a system, within the school system or within, like a learning experience system. So we are seeing a really interesting evolution of how young people are really taking what they learn in the classroom and bringing their own perspective and their own learned experience to it.
When we look at the young people across this country who are starting companies today, can you give us an example of a business that has been helped by your organization in terms of that business getting to that next level?
For sure. So I will share, we've got many examples of young people that we've worked with, and hopefully your audience will get to hear from some of them online if they search our website. But, one of the ones that we recently worked with at League of Innovators through our Labs incubator program was a young lady named Madison Gee, and she started a company. She was just starting the company when she came to us in 2018, and it was called Grant Me. And it was essentially a company that would find unused grants for post-secondary education, and would match those unused funds to students that needed them, whether it was based on region or the specific type of faculty that the student was going into. She had essentially found a way to measure and be able to find grants that were being unused all across this country, a huge amount of money that was being left on the table, while young people were accumulating debt at mind-boggling pace in the country. And so fast forward 2 years from 2018, and she has been able to match students with over $4 million worth of scholarships just in those 2 years, enabling over 2,000 young people in this country to be able to go to school without leaving their post-secondary education with a huge debt load. And I believe to date she has got over 50,000 young people that she's working with across the country to really help them match to the needed grants that they need. And so she has done this all on her own, bootstrapped the company from really first dollar to now, and she hasn't taken on any investment or of any sort, and is continuing to grow the business even during this time, during COVID, trying to help all her students and alumni that have gone through her startup to really find the employment and the experiences that they need to really be successful in the future.
Excellent. I know there are a lot of young people who are watching right now and who are concerned and curious about the future of work. Can you just let them know where they can go if they're looking for more inspiration, more practical help from League of Innovators? What's the best destination for those people to head on over to online?
For sure. So just head over to our main website, which is just www.theleagueofinnovators.com. And on there, you can find all the programs that we run, everything from our Innovators Academy, which is essentially like an online platform to get all the information about learning the tools and the skills that you need to adopt an entrepreneurial mindset. It's all free. It's all there for you to learn, all the way to our acceleration program. So if you do have an idea and you want to figure out how to build it, go into our foundation program. If you're ready to build your startup, join or apply to our labs incubator. Our next intake is in September 2020. So we're there to support young people and young people on their journey to, really owning their future and building the startups of tomorrow.
Excellent. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks so much for all the work that you're doing at this incredible organization.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, my name is Jason Shim, and I am the Director of Digital Strategy and Transformation at Pathways to Education Canada. Clearly, the education sector has been impacted by this. I mean, after all, no one is going back to school anytime soon. And I think that this is an opportunity to take a step back and really look at the gaps that exist. From my perspective, this reveals that there's a gap in access of internet, reliable internet connections. And given that all education is online right now, this is an opportunity to step up and define what the new normal is and the future that we want to see. So now that we're all online, these questions about who has access to the internet, who has enough devices at home, it's more important than ever, and it's a lifeline to the outside world. So now that all education is being delivered through online means, when we talk about things like future of work, really that's closely connected with the future of education as well. So the internet has always been important. It's just that it's critical now in order to ensure that youth and low-income communities are getting the support they need as well. We're doing work in the communities to try and address these gaps and really ensure that students are not only getting the connections that they need, quite literally, in terms of getting them connected to the resources, but the human connections, and we can't forget that part.
Running an online fitness business, not a whole heap has changed for me in the day-to-day over the last couple of months, but what has changed, I've become more aware of the encouragement and support that people are needing during this time, especially with so many people working from home, working out from home, doing everything from home. They need that extra support. And I think with things going online and using that technology and embracing that technology is going to be a really positive way for the future for the fitness industry. I feel like through a time like this, it makes us stop and has us understand that we can't always be in charge of everything and be in control of everything. Having that time to just stop and understand what it is that's really important to you and what makes you happy and what it is that you want out of life.
work has changed in my industry in the sense that it has evaporated in many ways in terms of our ability to have concerts and people together. So as a result, we're waking up in the morning and thinking not what will I do today, what do I have to do today, but rather what can I do today? What can I do that is different? What can I do that is creative? What can I do possibly to bring musical meaning to the lives of others in ways that I had not formerly envisioned? What's keeping me motivated and grounded is this unprecedented time for reflection. Not despair, but reflection, and thinking about why I do what I do and how I do what I do, and other things, the other parts of myself that I can bring to the work that I do. And that reflection has been, the ability to reflect has been time that I've really, really valued. A lot of lessons that we can learn from this, the value of us just being together in the same room is something that I don't think we'll ever take for granted in the same way. The ability just to go work at a coffee shop, go to a movie theater, just be with other people, not have to feel that the other is, the other that you encounter on the street is potentially dangerous. That's something that we took for granted before, and we will carry that with us. I would say to anybody who's entering the workforce that you need to think about whatever job it is that you're training for, whatever work it is that you're training for, there will always be a section, maybe like 30, 40, 50, maybe 60, 70% of that work that you're doing that also transfers to another occupation. It's a whole other skill set within your skill set. And be aware of that. Even if you're not using it for another job, or you don't even have thoughts of going for another job, just be aware of all the skills, all the different skills that you're bringing to whatever job it is that you're doing, and how the ways that you have different interests and different interest in engaging things in your life that may not be related to your job, those too can bring value to the work that you are doing. So you are a diverse person, and there are different things that you can do to bring those diversities in your life to fruition for the greater good of yourself, your work, and the people around you. Once again, Daniel Bartholomew Poyser with Toronto Symphony Orchestra and Symphony Nova Scotia. I hope that you're safe, and I hope that you're well.
Choir is all about bringing people into a room and singing and feeling the vibrations from each other. It's very immediate, and there's a lot that you can communicate without explaining yourself, just by your presence. Now we're at the dawn of a new reality. We're very much in the middle of trying to redefine what it is choir is during a huge stretch of time where we can't physically get together, which is very challenging.
I think it's making us do things that we didn't think about doing. Or we didn't have to think about doing because we were so busy doing live performances. And there's definitely a silver lining is that we're learning, but I think that goes for everybody, really.
I would say that the DNA of choir has not changed, and our mission has not changed, and nor will it change. The greatest strength I feel about this project is that it's got so many different ways to connect with people. So choir is really just the many different parts of the personalities of us and the people around us that make it what it is.
You know, it's really made me appreciate and understand that nothing can take the place of a live performance. There is no virtual performance. If anything, it's not showing that virtual is the way to go. It's showing that we need to be responsibly connected in a way, and we need to be more connected, whether that's, you know, governments working together, or whether it's, you know, preparedness for things like this, which people in the know knew something this was coming. This was not a big surprise. It's just that there was no money in it. There was no money in being prepared for something. So they decided, whatever, there's no point right now. We'll work on it later, or we'll cut costs right now. It's like, I think a lot of cracks are being exposed, and it's cracks that, you know, people fight hard to try to expose normally are being blown wide open. Everything that's happening now is the opposite of choir. It's like people gathering in a room and opening their mouths and being next to each other and singing, like whether it's arm in arm or their hands in the air, and everyone's just not afraid to sing. Like that will be choir. The first choir in some ways for me will be such a huge celebration in terms of the fact that what we're experiencing now is over to the point where we can actually celebrate in that way. So everything will be back before what we do. We will be the final celebration when this is over. You could talk about 5G, you could talk about VR. Nothing can replace the human contact. There's an energy in the room that comes off of our bodies when we're in that room. And I think that people are just dying to get back to that. I don't think any virus is going to take that away. There's no virus that can make people not want to do that. People will fight as much as they can to get back to that place.
I feel like if you come out of all of this the same way you went into it, then on some level you're missing the point. I feel like this is a great time to have conversations about how you live your life and what it is you prioritize and how you want to spend your time, your precious time on Earth. So for me, it's kind of like it's a flow of feeling positive about things and the possibilities of what we can do, fighting the fact that we may not be able to feel the same euphoria that we felt or we feel when we're doing it in real life, but then understanding that that's not possible right now and accepting that, you know, and just making peace with that on some level, because that's what everyone is experiencing on some level, and we'll get through it all together.
This is obviously the first time in my life anything like of this magnitude has really happened. And it's not like there were all of these systems that we didn't know were wrong 2 months ago or 4 months ago or 6 months ago. But it's just this sort of like, it's this externally imposed reset button that has been pushed that allows us to take the time to reassess. You know, I have a lot of friends that, you know, work 9-to-5 jobs and do, you know, have very different career paths than I do, who have said that this has been the first time in their career, in their adult life, that they've had the opportunity to assess whether this is what they want to be doing or not. Because, you know, the grind is deep in the world right now, and when people are fighting for the grind and they don't have time to assess whether this is what they want to be doing or not. And I think these last couple of months have given, not only on a personal level, everyone is sort of a real opportunity to assess where they're at, who they are, what they want, what they're doing, how close what they're doing is to who they want to be. But also on a global level, like, is this how we want to live our lives together? Is this what we want the world to be? Is this how we want to live? Is this what we want our societies to look like? Is this what we want our governments to be able to have roles in? Is this what we want to look to them for? Is this what we want big business to be able to do? Is this just as simple as, you know, as an office building that used to be downtown, and all of a sudden these companies are working well with everyone not going to an office building downtown. Well, when the building, you know, when the business comes back, do we need to send everyone back downtown? Do we need to have the same level of traffic in and out of major cities? You know, do we need that air pollution coming in? Do we need everyone piling into elevators every day? Do those companies need to be paying $100,000, $2,000, $1,000 a month in rent, you know, to house 100 people in an office when 70% of them can be doing just as good a job from home? You know, these kind of structures are going to get reassessed, and I think that's a really good thing. I think that, like I was saying before, you know, that we don't often get moments to reflect on where we've come, because we tend to move really fast, and we tend to just kind of take what's next, because we don't want to get left behind. Well, this moment is a moment for reflection and finding out whether this is where we want to be, and this is what we want to be doing, and this is how we want it to go. And if we don't, we can change it. We can change anything now. You know, we can. We're the ones in control of the way that we want to live, and we can do it with the way that we vote. We can do it with the way that we spend money. You know, I've heard many people say many times that the most important ballot is $1, and every dollar you spend is a way that you're voting in some way or another. So be conscious of what you're supporting, and whether the people you're supporting, consciously or unconsciously, are contributing to the world that you want to live in the future, or don't want to live in the future. We all want to live in a COVID-free world, and that we know for sure. But all of the other power structures that have been slowly putting into place, here's our moment to assess whether we want them or not, and what we can do about it. So that's something I believe is something kind of beautiful about this time, and I hope that mankind and you know, all of us individually and collectively take the time we feel we need to assess whether we're doing the right things or not, and what kind of world we want to be in. So for the foreseeable future, I can't wait to play a show, rock out with some people. Thank you for having me speak.
My name is Riya, and the future of work for myself is definitely very exciting. I see something where there's a growing adoption of artificial intelligence in the workplace, where we constantly start to use technology more and more for tasks that we do on a day-to-day basis. But more than that, I think that there's going to be a growing emphasis on things like soft skills. So being able to communicate with people, present, work with people, and collaborate both in the office and remotely as well. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, I think that one of the things that I was most surprised about was how fast we were actually able to adapt to the changes happening in the world around us, and how it actually got easier as the days went by. I found myself going on Zoom meetings a lot more, using Slack, and a lot of the tools that we use to communicate with each other in a better way. So I definitely see a very positive future for us, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Hi, my name is Mo Desiania, and I run a boutique media agency called Empathy. What does the future of work mean to me? You see, I've always been fascinated by a certain aspect of human behavior. We crave personalization in our personal lives. I want my airline to know my seat preferences. I want a custom shirt and custom orthotics. I want custom kitchen countertops and my custom kitchen for my custom home. But yet, for 8 hours a day, we show up to these places and we cater all of our habits towards our employers. See, I think the future of work is in personalization of the employee experience. And yes, as it's very evident by the times right now, that means you can work from anywhere and anytime. But it's also so much more than that. I think employees should be able to work the way they want. In fact, should be able to get paid in a way that makes sense for them. Organizations that figure out how to scale employee customizations will win the future of work. To me, that starts with empathy.
Hi, I'm freelance journalist Jared Limson, and my advice for those who are trying to figure out how to navigate the very difficult career landscape that we unfortunately are dealing with today is to understand that you might not get everything that you want out of your next job or career in a single place. Normally, you would expect to have a long-term career opportunity that pays well, that provides career growth, mentorship, and everything that you would want in sort of one place. But during difficult economic times, the reality is that more and more people are going to have to piece together their career and get everything that they want from different places. That might mean combining volunteer opportunities with higher learning on top of a part-time job. That could mean freelancing for a number of different companies, some of which provide the career growth that you're looking for, some of which just pay the bills. There's going to be a lot more mixing and matching of different opportunities in order to sort of combine them into getting everything that you want. But it's important to understand that it's okay if you're not able to find everything you want right now under the same roof. So long as you're able to piece together different opportunities that give you a little bit of what you're looking for out of your career. And I wish you the best of luck.
This one goes out to everybody who's like stuck inside right now. It ain't about the people that you know, the places that you go, the people that you meet when you travel on the road. It's about the pleasure and the pain, dancing in a motherfucking rain, that feeling that you're feeling when you no one else to blame. Gotta keep it going and maintain and give thanks. Give thanks to all my family and my friends. I give thanks, motherfucker, no sorrow. I focus on today and worry about tomorrow. Cause you really don't need luck to not feel stuck. Teach a man to fish by giving them a buck, and that's what's up. And I swear that we'll make it out right now. I just don't know how. I just don't know how. As the days turn to hours, the hours turn to days. I wonder how long it's gonna be this way.
All right, thank you so much for joining us for the after show today. I hope that you have enjoyed the past hour. We have a lot more coming during the after show, and then we're going to wrap things up in about 40 minutes because I know many of you who are in the Eastern time zone probably have family and dinner to get to, but we wanted to get through a couple of group chats that we're going to have. And before we dive into those chats with different groups of people, I'm going to first have a short conversation with Laura Pierce, who is from Twitter. She's the head of marketing in Canada. Twitter, of course, has been making headlines over the past couple of weeks in terms of remote work. And answering that question of what actually happens to the office and where do people go, I also want to encourage people who are in the chat right now to keep the comments coming and the questions coming, and to make sure to go in here. I know Jeff's in there, Chris is in there, Craig's in there. There's a bunch of people who are asking questions. Keep the questions coming, and we will jump back and forth for the next 40 minutes. So Laura, I know you have been standing by. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me.
All right, Laura. So during this session, we really want to answer the question about what is going to happen to the office in terms of the future of work. Twitter was one of the first big tech companies to make headlines announcing that some employees could work from home forever. Let's talk about the culture at Twitter, because the truth is, Jack, who of course is one of the founders, has always been pretty comfortable with this idea of remote work.
That's right. In fact, Jack talked a lot about decentralization before COVID. And I think this has been an interesting way to really see that we can make this work and be a truly remote company. So, there's been a bit of a progression. On March 10th, we had a mandatory work from home for all employees. And then recently, Jack's announcement around the work from home forever. And I think really what Twitter's trying to say is that Twitter wants us to work where we're most comfortable, where we're most creative, and at this point in time where we're the safest. And I think it's just important to note that we all feel pretty lucky that the company cares about us that much to say that. And we know that it isn't available to everybody in different fields. And so just want to recognize that it's not as easy for all companies, but we're proud of the work that we're doing.
Absolutely. And I do want to ask people who are watching right now to leave us comments. And the question I have for the people in the comments is this: is the office dead? Is this the end of people going to physical spaces? So if you can let us know in the comments, that would be fantastic. Laura, you said something when we had a pre-event call where you talked about, in some ways, how this could be a real equalizer, right? And I think that's worth addressing. I mean, like you said, it's not perfect for everyone, but there are certain people and certain, I think, demographics where working from home does make sense.
Yeah, I think what I was talking about is that, when you're a remote office or a smaller region like in Canada, or even a distributed office in the US, there is a possibility of feeling somewhat disconnected from what is traditionally known as HQ. And Jack really has talked about wanting to get away from this concept of HQ. But it has been a big equalizer in that everyone is remote. So those hallway conversations that you all often feel that you didn't get to take part in are all happening on the calls and through Slack. So we've been leveraging heavily Google Hangouts and Slack for communication, both meetings wise and socially. And that's been really powerful for us. And it's really been a big democratization of everybody around the world, which those of us in remote regions or smaller regions appreciate.
I think it's also worth noting that we can look to some other countries who have gone through this and who have, in some cases, done this well. You also mentioned what's happening in Brazil in terms of reducing traffic congestion. Can you talk a little bit about some of the different areas where we can learn from as far as how they're dealing with the reality that sometimes physical office spaces can lead to some major issues?
Yeah, I think what we talked about a little bit is that I think what Jack has said is that there's an option to work from home forever if that is what works for you and the role that you're in. But we know that there are some people that will want to come back to offices, because I joked with you that I've never spent so much time with my kids since I was on mat leave, and that's been great. And also I haven't spent as much time with my kids since I was on mat leave. So there are moments in the workday when you want to, maybe have a little bit of quiet. I did have to say no yelling at the Fortnite screen before I got on this call. So, so I think one of the things that's kind of interesting is that apparently in Brazil, they actually have a system where you can only drive on the roads on certain days based on your date of birth or different things. And I think even though offices may open, and ours will not open before the fall, but there may be a graduated way that we access the offices. There may be certain days, and Twitter hasn't necessarily said this, it's just out in the universe that we will have to access the office in a different way because of the physical distancing that may still be in place depending on where we land with vaccinations and all of the other elements that are part of this.
I do want to ask you one more question before we bring in our other guests. And this question is around what else is happening at Twitter in terms of allowances for things such as technology, such as health and wellness. I mean, you can't just send people home and say, hey, this has to work. You have to really coach them along the way.
Yeah, and I think Twitter's done a really good job of that. One, we've had a lot of coaching, and we've obviously, as a tech company, we've been leaned into the tech side and collaborating globally for some time. So it was not as big a transition for us, but also they have given us productivity allowance, which allows us to buy equipment that might be needed in the home. For instance, I've been holding off getting a second monitor because I didn't want to junk up my dining room table, to be honest. But now that I know this is going to be longer term, I may use that to buy those things. And they've given us a list of things that qualify. They've also increased our fitness and wellness budgets to compensate for the fact that we may not be accessing the programs that we were. So again, feeling pretty lucky that Twitter's done so much for us. And really, it's been a good experience and very interesting.
So we're going to turn this into a group chat, and while we get everybody else into this conversation, I wanted to jump into the comments for a second because there are some great comments that are coming in. We have a comment here from Angela Donnelly, who is saying that one size won't fit all. I think that's absolutely true. We have some other comments. Jason says, I like working from home as long as I don't have to do it from, home. I really miss going to a cafe. And I think that's a really good point, because the truth is, even though we're talking about working from home, I think what we're talking about at the end of the day is working from anywhere. And eventually, as some of the restrictions are eased, the reality is there's going to be more and more people who are working from different places in terms of cafes and co-working centers. So it's definitely going to change. I now want to bring in a few other people to join us, Laura. And we have Mike Girgis from Big Digital from Ensemble, who is here. We also have Jamie Grossman, who is the managing principal at Krista. So we can have a conversation about corporate real estate. And we have Sandy Jobin Bevins, who is a partner at Norman Howard. So we're going to make this a group chat for the next few minutes. And maybe I'll start with you, Mike, in terms of a conversation about the future of work. And really, why this topic, I think, is just so important. And there's so many challenges we have to solve today.
Yeah, I think, first of all, thanks for the great work today, by the way, Amber, and your work hosting and co-producing with us. It was a fantastic show, and it looks like everyone's really enjoyed it on the comments. So amazing work to you and Chris. This subject matter has so many facets to it, but I think as we look at the culture piece and how do you deal with virtual culture building is probably we can talk about physicality, we can talk about offices. Jamie, I'm sure you have a lot of feedback on what's happening in the real estate space. But as we look at how do you create virtual culture, how do you create that team environment, is probably one of the most biggest pieces of subject matter that I think is timely and important, and certainly something that has been brought up in the comments today. But certainly something that I'd love to throw out to the rest of the group on how do you create virtual culture?
Yeah, absolutely. And Jamie, maybe we can jump over to you next in terms of that conversation about the actual physical workspaces, because as much as it seems easy to send people home, there's going to be a massive impact on the commercial real estate market. So let's dive into that.
Yeah, the real estate market is going to go through dramatic change in the city of Toronto. For a long time, we've had a lack of space and a fight to find great space. I think that's going to change, at least in the short term, which has some nice aspects. But I want to build on Mike's comment because it's very, very interesting. We've seen a lot of evolution in real estate planning over the last decade. And every time there's been an opportunity for companies to potentially save money on real estate in the short term, they've usually tried to do that. So Co-working was an example of that, densification of office spaces and the open concept. And now even COVID-19 presents an interesting opportunity for some companies to actually lower their second largest fixed annual expense. But the reason I don't think that's going to last for the long term is the ability to attract and retain talent and the ability to drive culture is very dependent on bringing people together. It's not cheaper. When we saw most of the tech companies move downtown in the last number of years, they didn't come because it was cheap. They came because they were trying to find great talent and develop that culture. And I think that's really going to be in crisis for the next little while as we work our way through this.
So Sandy, I'm going to throw the culture question over to you because I think it's a big one. And in fact, we had a comment come through here. I believe it was from Baron talking about how trust becomes so important in this equation to make this successful. Can you talk a little bit about how you see this is going to work and how do you maintain culture within an organization that is so decentralized?
That's a question for me. Oh, sure. Okay. I can tell you that as someone who's more of a freelancer, the thing that we're mostly trying to get people to trust us on is coming in, and I do a lot of obviously live hosting through my Second City background. And so if you brought up the idea of trust, it's now trying to get organizations to trust that we can enhance a big meeting that's on Zoom or whatever it is, whatever the platform is. And I think at first a lot of organizations thought they could just do it on their own, be fine. And then we're getting a lot of people reaching out and saying, can you please make this more exciting? That's the idea of where they're trusting us to enhance what they're doing, if you want to get into the idea of trust.
Yeah, and I think, whether you're a solopreneur or a freelancer or running a small business, I mean, that conversation around trust becomes so important with all of us working in a decentralized manner. The truth is that our clients, our colleagues, we all have to have trust together for this to work. And if that trust erodes, I think there's a big problem. Laura, I'll ask the last question to you in terms of this conversation around trust. Is there anything specific that Twitter has been doing to ensure that you're able to maintain those cultural pieces that make Twitter what it is, but also that trust among your employees?
Absolutely. I think from a cultural perspective, we talked a little bit before in the prep where in our old environment, we all sat in the office for lunch together, all of us at the same time. So there's a real sense of camaraderie. And so we've tried to maintain that. We've been doing some fun things, like we do what we call office cribs, and you put 15 minutes on everybody's calendar. You do a little virtual tour of your crib, your at-home crib. I had my kids do a funny video. Other people have shown like music collections and sneaker collections and all sorts of fun stuff. So just kind of to create an environment just so you know where that person is when they're home and what's around them. So that's been really fun. And I think in terms of trust, I think we use Slack a lot, and we have social channels on Slack and we have work channels on Slack. So I think it creates this immediacy of communication that you have in the office where you could lean over and say, oh, hey, Slack has helped us to do that. So, and helps people feel close and trust that they can reach out and talk to someone that they need to get an answer from in a meaningful way quickly. So that's, we've been sort of a combination of technology and then just having some fun.
Okay, so speaking of having fun, Sandy, I'm not going to ask you any more questions about culture or trust, but I am going to throw to you. I believe that you have answers to those trivia questions.
I do. Amber, listen, I was ready for any kind of question you were going to throw at me. You mentioned the word office. I've never worked in one. You've mentioned things that I have no idea what they're about, but I tried to sound professional. I mean, I look at a lot of professional, not Girgis, but Jamie and Laura are very professional. And I try to just, treat this with all the respect that I could. Okay. All right. Some trivia answers. And I had 3 questions about the Toronto Blue Jays. And I'm happy to say, Amber, someone got all 3 correct. And we're going to donate some money to the food banks of Canada in that person's name. The first question was, who is the only Blue Jay to hit 4 home runs in one game? The answer there was Carlos Delgado. A lot of people got that. One person answered BJ Birdie, which was incorrect. The second question was, which pitcher was on the mound in 1992 when the Jays won their first World Series? That moment in the 9th inning, and that was Mike Timlin. That was the answer. He threw the ball. Laura, Who was at first base when Mike Timlin threw that for the out?
Me?
Yeah,
I'm going to
apparently
defer
Chris
to
told
Mike
me that you
Girgis.
know everything Blue Jays. You know who was playing first base when Mike Timlin threw that ball? Want to take a shot?
Not.
Don't hold back,
Joe
Laura.
Carter. Joe Carter is the answer.
Okay.
Joe Carter was at first base. And then finally, who had the 28-game win streak, or sorry, hitting streak, 28-game hitting streak for the Blue Jays, and that was Sean Green. Chris McLaughlin got all three correct, and we're going to be donating to the food banks of Canada in his name. Thank you. There's so many answers on the board. I really appreciate that. And that's everything from sports trivia genius. Back to you, Amber.
All right. I will say that Chris McLaughlin wins everything because I don't know Chris personally, but I know him from Facebook Live, and he is a superstar. So he has all the trivia answers. I see that. Okay, I want to thank Laura, thank Mike, thank Sandy, thank Jamie for joining us. We're going to move on to our next group, but it was a lot of fun chatting about the future of work, and thank you so much for being here. Okay, so I'm going to jump into the questions for a second and see if anyone has any questions or comments. Valerie says it's hard for new people when they don't know who to write on Slack. Onboarding can be very difficult. Maybe we will address that question in our next session. And a few other people have comments as well as far as the future of work and what's going to happen with things such as culture. And I think at the end of the day, if I scroll through all of your comments, really the message that keeps coming back time and time again is that it will not be a one-size-fits-all solution, and every business is going to have to work incredibly hard to make this work, no matter what your size is. And I think it's fair to say that some of the technology businesses like Twitter, Facebook, Google, they're going to have an easier time because they have been moving in some ways towards this for some time. I think I would even put Shopify in that category as well. So we have a comment here from Michael saying it all plays into real estate and investment, talking about that conversation about commercial real estate as well, and a few other comments from people. So keep the comments coming. Let us know what you think of the broadcast so far and how it is going for all of you. And please share this video with people if you're interested in discussing the future of work with your friends and family on Facebook. And we will definitely appreciate anyone who shares this as well. I see a comment here from Angela who says Zoom only enables virtual backgrounds on higher spec laptops, talking about the specifics of virtual conferencing. I would argue as well, this is a topic that we really need to start addressing, is that if we are going to be remote, if we're going to be working virtual, there has to be something better than the Zoom experience. I'd be curious what people think about Zoom in the comments, if they feel as though this is a good platform for collaboration, or if they think perhaps we need a way to really improve on that. So I do hope that we're going to see more technology solutions that will come out over time that will further enable collaboration, because to me, that feels like the one piece that's missing. And I'm just not confident that Zoom is the answer right now. I think there has to be another answer. And I think there has to be a better way. Laura has made a comment here, Laura, who was just in our chat, who says, we have created Slack channels for departments, work streams and social channels, so new people can just get added and they have access to the whole channel and its members. It's really interesting because it strikes me that this means that the onboarding process and HR is going to have, in some ways, a more difficult job in terms of the future of work. And getting people starting at a business will indeed be more challenging in some ways. Okay, so I have heard the news that it looks like we have everybody all set for this next conversation. And this will be about 12 minutes long. And we have a great group of people who is joining us next. We have Baron from PSBX, part of the Ensemble team. We have Hilton Barber, who's a marketing consultant. Carolyn Swara, who is a workplace culture architect. I'm very excited to further dive into culture with you. And we also have Eric Tumuend, who is a speaker on the workplace and company culture. So thank you to everybody for joining us. I didn't really do this last time, but I think it's worth getting everybody to just do a little bit of a background on what you do. And if you were listening to that last conversation, if we could start into that piece about culture, because Baron, I think you were in the comments and had made a comment about this. How do we maintain culture within a workplace, and what role does trust play? I'm really looking for that answer, and hopefully we'll get to that before the after show wraps.
Yeah, I'm looking for that answer too. I think hopefully making sure you can hear me okay. But what I'm looking for is we're trying to have as many conversations with our people as we can. I saw a lot of comments in the chat around trust and the side conversations and the hallway conversations. And I think replicating those in our new disconnected work from home, or as we call it, work. How do we replicate those? So I don't mean to answer with a question, but I think those are the things we're trying to figure out. So whether it's, added one-on-ones or new training segments or, sharing conversations for future improvement, how do people feel heard and interactive for positive actions going forward to enable trust?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Carolyn will be the perfect person to further expand on this question in terms of culture. And I have to ask this question because I have not heard this title before. And this is the interesting thing during this time. There's a lot of titles in terms of businesses that I have not heard. This is a title of a workplace culture architect. Can you talk a little bit about that role and what you do and how culture fits into that?
Yeah, so I took creative liberty. Maybe I was inspired by Hilton, who knows? But I can't come in and tell an organization what their culture is going to be, but I can help them put the building blocks in place so that they can build a culture that meets their needs and what they need. So that's really where the title came from. I think when I think of trust is an outcome in my perspective. And I think what this situation has done is it has revealed the fact that many of us don't really know how trust is built with people. It's one of those nebulous things. It just happens or it doesn't. And so I believe trust will be able to be built just fine, but we are going to have to be more intentional and understand what goes behind it. And there are several things like, are you getting your work done? How credible are you? There's other elements of your character as well. But at the core of this, I think it's going to help us as leaders, and everyone can be a leader. But for those who have the title, it's going to help them raise their bar and really up their game.
Absolutely. We had a comment in here from Allison who says, how do technical glitches impact culture and engagement? I think that's an interesting question because I know we might be having some audio troubles here and there in the live portion of our show. And I think it's a good point. I don't think that technology is necessarily there yet. Hilton, I'm going to come to you next because I noticed during the past hour or so that you were commenting in the thread as far as this conversation around the future of work. If there was one message that you gathered from what was happening in the comments and a common theme, what would that be?
Well, I think that the comments around culture is probably the one that I'm going to take away. It's at the center of a deep belief I have that it really is what differentiates every organization. And right now, it's going to differentiate whether you succeed or whether you fail during this next period. I think the biggest problem is we tend to misinterpret what culture really is. And that we talk about things like working from home as a definition of culture, where in truth, the reality is your culture is how you make decisions as an organization, how you act and behave. And that's the culture conversation I don't think that we're having as we're talking about important things like working from home. But I would suggest things like collaboration is not 10 hours of Zoom calls a day. And I would suggest making a decision is getting harder and harder for organizations who aren't used to having people in 4 or 5 different locations. And that really, for me, is the culture conversation we need to have, is how is our culture going to adapt to this new reality? And sadly, I'm seeing a lot of old school culture manifestations now just being dispersed digitally. We're not really looking at things like who makes decisions. And I really love Ben Feist's comment earlier when he talked about NASA pushing it down to a level where a 31-year-old was making some of the biggest decisions in the history of that organization. I'd ask anybody on here, have they got an organization that can do that can distribute decision-making like that today, because that's the cultures we're going to need for this new reality.
Absolutely. And as you were speaking and you were talking about, I think how some organizations are thinking that just by collaborating and having Zoom calls that somehow replicates the in-person experience within an office. I think one of the things that was top of mind to me as you were talking about that is that empathy also plays an incredible role, because if you know that there are people at home in environments where they can't control what their kids are doing, what's happening in their house, all of a sudden we have to approach work with I think a more gentle tone of being empathetic to people. And Eric, I'm going to throw that question to you. I know this is something that you speak about, workplace and company culture. How does empathy change in terms of leaders having to really embrace that?
Look, I'm tuning in from Vancouver today, so I'm a Vancouverite, but I'm also here in British Columbia, which means I'm a British Columbian. But I'm also, of course, in Canada, which makes me a Canadian. Now, in these times, I think we can really compare culture to how we're living and where we live too. So while we might be part of a company, we're also a part of the department. But most importantly now, I think we're part of our immediate team. And that empathy from our immediate leader, how we communicate with our teams and how we customize that communication, I think is more important now than it's ever been before, because we don't see the boardroom mission, vision, values. We don't see the colors of the logo. We don't see the keg in the lunchroom or the ping pong table in the common space. We've got our leader, our immediate team, and the people that ultimately allow us to live our day and work our job most effectively. I think that we like to think that the future of work is a destination. It's a shoe that fits every size foot. And I think that that's a big misunderstanding of the uniqueness of the people that are working in these jobs. I mean, 28% of our people in Canada now are essential staff, and their work hasn't changed all that much rather than a plexiglass in front of them and perhaps a mask on their face. I think the more we can tailor and customize what the future of work looks like, the better we can create that experience and the more empathy we can practice towards our people.
I'm going to ask one question to each of you to wrap up our session. And just a short question for all of you. For people who have been watching over the past almost 2 hours, many of them who are running their own businesses, have small, medium-sized businesses, what would you say to them in terms of how to really thrive over the next few months when we know that change is a constant and we're in this state of chaos? Hilton, I'm going to start with you, and then I'll go around the panel.
Fantastic question. I think I would look at it as, what are you prepared to give up? What are you prepared to lose about the way you've run your business before? I think, the notion of sacred cows, which of your sacred cows in terms of your culture are you prepared to say no more? It's no longer applicable. I am going to give this up. I think that's a hugely symbolic thing that will change how people perceive your culture around you. So what is it you're prepared to give up?
That's a great point. Baron, what about you? What would you say to people watching right now?
Well, what I'm finding working is conversations. I think the idea in the old way of working is a lot of people acted like they had the answers. We don't have the answers. So that means answers for new problems can come top down as we were trained in now what's going to be called ancient times. But I think answers and ideas are going to come both ways, from the youngest workers and interns. That's why I'm so concerned to see the internships this summer get hollowed out, because I think there's a training that goes both ways there. So I think if you're running a company like our company, which is 6 people, small, and whether you're running large organizations like our partners at RBC, talking to your staff, talking to your clients, talking to your partners, what do they want to see? And then making sure you're aligned to that. I think people are trying to do too much with too little too soon, and conversations can help us focus.
So Caroline, if I jump to you, how can leaders start those conversations? And I say the word leader, and it sounds like I'm talking only about large organizations, but also as a small business owner with a small team under 10 people, we also have to lead during this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a great opportunity for leaders to really connect with themselves and recognize that they don't have all the answers, nor do they need to have all the answers, and they can create the environment and the space. I love what you said, Baron, about creating more space for conversations with your employees, because collectively you will come up with the way forward. And we've got to learn, we've got to get comfortable with prototyping and trying stuff out before we have perfect answers. And the more we can do that, the more we can iterate and grow faster.
Absolutely. And Eric, it's always the hardest being the last because everyone said so much. But just to build on this, what's your final piece of advice for people watching right now?
Well, look, actually, I appreciate getting to go last because I get to echo and piggyback off of what everyone has said. You know, at the start of this conversation, we talked about culture preservation. To me, that sort of sounds like preserving the DVD or the VHS. And I don't think that's necessarily what we get to do. In a new normal, in a time where we get to create and build an intentional future, I think we have to decentralize that process and involve everyone on our team. A really practical step that I think we can do is bring our team together and ask them 3 questions. Number 1, what should we start doing? Number 2, what should we stop doing? And number 3, what should we continue doing? And then when we can continue to evolve this process day after day, week after week, and month after month, the future of work isn't just something that happens to us. I think it's something that we intentionally create.
Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you to everybody for joining me today and for participating in the future of work. Appreciate your time. And now we're going to move on to the next session. So thanks so much for being here. All right, so I'm going to jump into the comments as we get our final session up and running and all of our panelists joining. I just want to do a big shout out to the tech team at Ensemble who is running at this piece of the show. It's challenging getting more than a dozen people being part of this live conversation, and you're doing an awesome job. So keep it up, and I will keep things together here on this end. Jeff Garlick has a question, and the question is, how do we take the first step, and what should it be in terms of surviving the future of work? Jeff, I think that's a really great question that we can get into. And I think in some ways we touched on that a little bit because we talked about how important it is to be flexible. Something that I've been talking about for many years now is relentless adaptation. So this idea that you have to constantly be okay with change. And I think during this time, we're all feeling that. And, you know, some people for sure love the routine of going into the office 9 to 5, having that structure. And all of a sudden we have no real structure in terms of what our days look like. And it can be very difficult. You know, not to bring up ducklings again, but we just adopted 2 ducklings. And I will say, you know, having our 11-year-old home, having our dog who requires a lot of attention, running my business with my husband, and adopting these little ducklings. I mean, our days just look totally chaotic, and it's very different. But in many ways, I just have to laugh about it and embrace it and make the best of it, because I know it can be really challenging. So we have a comment here. Allison says you should review your business model and be prepared to pivot. I know that Jeff works in retail, and I think for people who are employees, I think there's also a challenge here in terms of figuring out what the future looks like for you. And it definitely looks very different than perhaps a small business owner. So we have about 10 minutes left for this event. So I do want to get our next panelists on. I have been scrolling through the comments as much as possible, and I have a couple of comments that you've made here. I will make sure to get to them during this final session. So I want to welcome Andrew Lein from RBC. I also want to welcome Angela Donnelly, Rachel Kelly, who's the founder of Make Lemonade, Jared Linzon, who's a journalist for publications such as Rolling Stone and Fast Company. And I think to wrap up with this conversation about the future of work, we may go a little bit broader and talk about a bit of the divide that exists, because I think that is something that has been coming up time and time again in the comments, and also how you bring people into the mix. And Andrew, I would love to talk and start with you, because I saw a comment in here about what RBC is doing in terms of interns, and we touched on that in the last session. Can you talk a little bit about how you're helping keep students in that role of having internships?
Yeah, well, we were fortunate enough. We were speaking about leaders a lot in the last session there, and we have an amazing leader by the name of Dave Mackay, who publicly committed to the Globe and Mail in an op-ed a few months back that knows that we would honor all of our student commitments globally. So that was a really exciting moment. And as someone who works in recruitment, and the comment was actually from one of my colleagues, hi, Allison. You know, a lot of us really were tasked with figuring out how we do something that we would normally consider to be a large but practiced and rehearsed process of onboarding over 1,000 students in the course of a couple of months. We had to do that in a completely different way this time. And so in addition to just the excitement of being able to live up into and honor that commitment, there was a secondary excitement that came along with it that's really mirrored a lot of the conversation that we've seen in the chat today around how do you enable all of that virtually? We can't just hand laptops to people. They can't just come in and meet their manager. They may never actually meet their team outside of an environment like the one that we're all in right now. So we've really been trying to design around not only, you know, what is it that they need to be able to do their job and to be able to be productive, but how is it that we can lean into that culture piece? How is it that we can promote wellness? How is it that we can continually promote connection and create new opportunities for them wherever possible throughout this? And I think that that's going to tie into a lot of what everyone else here has a lot of expertise in. So I'll leave it at that, and happy to kind of hearken back to it as we go forward. Just wanted an excuse to use the word hearken.
Hearken. Who doesn't want to use that word? I mean, really.
Right.
I think also you really bring up a good point, and a word maybe we haven't used as much, although it's been used out there in the media world over and over again, which is that many organizations are learning how to pivot. And Rachel, I want to come to you next. You're the founder of Make Lemonade. First up, I would like you to talk a little bit about what your business does and how you've pivoted from in-person to community building in the virtual sense.
Yes, absolutely. So Make Lemonade is a co-working space for women in business. And our new unofficial official slogan is we pivoted from IRL to URL, and our mission still remains the exact same, and that is to make you feel like a boss. Whether you are in your pajamas and prefer to work from home that way, or you choose to put on a dress and lipstick for the day. So from the very heart of it, co-working, I think we've just kind of expanded on what the definition of co-working is. And now we've created some online opportunities. We've launched a virtual membership and have just really expanded our community from just being a Toronto-based small business.
I'm going to pivot the conversation a little bit when I go to Angela and Jared, because I do want to talk more about what this means for the worker. So we see these organizations on a bigger scale like RBC that are pivoting. We see a company like Rachel's that's also pivoting. But Angela, I would love your perspective on what this means for the individual and how can they feel empowered during this time and feel as though they're able to achieve a different level of success.
I hope I can answer that by pivoting back to something that was said earlier, which just grabbed me, which was, there was a comment that we don't know how trust is made. And just to give some perspective, so I work with an anthropologist who spent many years working with the Chamber of Mines in South Africa to understand, and this was in the late 80s, so it was to understand employee satisfaction. They didn't even call it engagement in those days. And what is the link between employee satisfaction and trust? And at the end of the day, after many various hypotheses had been studied, it came down to one golden nugget, which was simply that management is either accepted or rejected based on their perceived interest in their employees' welfare. In other words, do you care about me as a human being, or do you just see me as a set of hands to get the job that you need to get done? And trust is either granted or withheld on that basis. So when we're talking about empowering our employees, it sits with leadership. And the kind of leadership that we need going forward is the kind of leadership that can truly empower their people. Empowerment is about an incremental suspension of control. We need to hold back on the control, and we need to be able to replace it with accountability and truly empower our workforces if they're going to be working how they will in future.
I think it's a great point, and I think you bring it again back to this conversation about leadership, and do we have the leaders that we deserve right now in terms of helping us really navigate through this? And Jared, I'm going to go to you for a question about what is happening right now with the future of work. I was reading some things that you wrote in terms of where we are at today, and why this means that much of that work is really going to be much more independent than we've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, so yeah, sorry.
Keep going. Keep going.
Okay. Yes. So, I mean, well, we are all working independently now to some degree. And for the longest period of time, really for the 100 years that followed the Industrial Revolution, work was very much about creating, as Angela was describing, that pair of hands, to that person to be at every workstation, someone to get the job done. And for that whole period, and so many of the rules of work that still exist today were established during that initial period of Industrial Revolution. And so at that time, it sort of evolved from a situation where people were most productive based on their own abilities, based on their individual know-how, based on their individual creativity. And that evolved into this period of standardization where, again, you just needed to have someone at every single station. And all of a sudden, the most valued skills of the individual were things like just being able to show up, consistency, punctuality, those sorts of things that you would want probably more in a robot than a human. But that is what the factory system was all about, was creating a cheap labor force. And over time, so many of the rules that were created for this period remained and have remained for the last 100 years. But now we're in this very interesting period where a lot of the sort of guardrails are coming off, and we're returning to a place where, once again, individuals are being valued for their creativity.
I think we might have just lost Jared's audio for a second.
So I'm so sorry about that.
It's okay. I'm sure it was absolutely brilliant. So if you want to just pick up the last 10 seconds.
Yeah, no problem. So I was just saying that there's this period where people were being most valued for basically their most robotic traits. And now we're finally re-entering a period that more closely resembled how work existed for the entirety of human history up until the Industrial Revolution, where individuals are being valued for their creativity, for their individual know-how, and for more of those sort of real skills, not just showing up and getting the job done.
Absolutely. I'm going to jump in the comments for a second. We have a comment here from Lewis who says, this is where empathy and compassion become so relevant. And there's some great comments coming in. We just have about 2 minutes left. So I'm actually going to go around the panel. And I want to ask you guys something that I haven't asked any panelists yet, but I think it's important because this is all about learning today. And I think it's important we share what we've learned. And so my question for all of you, starting with Rachel, is over the past couple of months, what have you learned that has helped you navigate throughout this time?
That's a great question, because I've learned, I think, a heck of a lot more than I have learned in the entire 2.5 years of running our business than I have in this kind of condensed period. I think I've really learned that when time is put in a pressure cooker, I can accomplish a lot more than I kind of set my mind to. And if you stick to the fundamentals of your business and look at really what that is, your community will always be there. If that's what you put at the forefront of your business, and that just really encompasses the philosophy of Make Lemonade.
Well, Rachel, it's always tough being the first one to answer the question because everybody else has a minute to think about it. Angela, I'm going to go to you next. What have you learned personally throughout the past couple of months?
I think I've learned a lot about myself, and I've learned a lot about how we process change. And I've stood up in front of audiences and I've said things about we're living in times of disruption and complexity and uncertainty on a given. My goodness, that was last year. It was like a children's birthday party where you didn't know if the entertainer would arrive. This is uncertainty. This is where life is an ungiven. And I was just surprised to learn how long it took me to process this. For the first 2 months, I really believed I was probably in denial. I thought this would just be over soon, and I spent my time productively working on new stuff, doing it the old way, for when things opened up again. And it took me 2 months and a bit of a prompt from a client who said to me, can you do some online stuff for us? For me to actually realize, you know what, you can actually embrace this opportunity. And I needed that. Once I started doing that, now I'm super excited. And that's why I'm so, clued up on, Zoom and everything else, and where breakaway rooms are and where they aren't. But just the realization how long it takes people to come to terms with change, I think has been a big learning for me. Yeah.
I think it's a good point. Jared, what about you?
So I've been working remotely for like 7, 8 years now. So at first I thought, this is going to be a walk in the park. This is just business as usual. 2 important things, though, that I learned. Firstly, working from home and working from home in a pandemic are very different things. And so a lot of people who are experiencing remote work for the first time might have a little bit of a different impression. And even for me, again, I've been doing this for as long as I can remember, pretty much the entirety of my career. And still these last 2 months have been more difficult in a lot of ways than the rest of my remote work experience. So I hope that people don't assume that it's always going to be like that. But the one silver lining, which is the other thing that I've learned, is that remote work is actually a lot easier when everyone else is doing it too. And people have this sort of understanding of what it's like to work remotely. It used to be that, every time I placed a call, people assumed I was in an office until there was an awkward part of the conversation where I had to correct them, or they said, can you talk to somebody who's over here? And I said, I'm in the different building. So it's nice to have that level of empathy with everyone I'm speaking to. But again, it is different to work remotely in the middle of a crisis than it is to just work remotely on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And lastly, Andrew, what have you learned?
Yeah, I'm not with the RBC team, but also part of the Ensemble team. And I think one of the greater ironies here, the future of work was going to be our topic for this volume before any of this happened. And both in the work that I described earlier that we did with the students and the work that we've done to plan this entirely new way to deliver Ensemble, in both cases, the sort of impetus that we've seen in all the business articles and everything we're sharing on LinkedIn is move fast. Now we're seeing the future of work is now. Now is the time to evolve, and all of those things that are so a part of the way we're thinking on a day-to-day basis to get as much out of this as we can and evolve and make as much progress as we can. But then at the same time, what I've really learned is there's such a human side to all of this, and you can't really just chalk the future of work up to technology. We've seen so much in the chat and heard from many of our contributors today about how important the human side of all of this is. I was talking with people on a call today about how this entire experience has really opened up some of the cracks that we see in our society, and we've really turned ourselves back in. And to hear Doug Ford talking today about long-term care facilities and what they've learned about those facilities that they never would have learned if it weren't for this, and to see all of the human sides of everything that we've done come together, and even just the reactions of employees at workplaces that have been told that they may never ever be asked to go back into their office, and the way people are dealing with that. I've really learned that while you can be opportunistic and while there's chances and moments that you can seize and drive forward, that we are all people. Kind of similar to Jared's point about the differences between doing it in a pandemic. That's really exacerbated everything, not just the pace of innovation, but also the pace of human change. And I think that that's something that I've been thinking about a lot.
Yeah, I think, again, another excellent point. I know Lewis in the comments said something similar, saying that he feels as though we've been out of step for a long time. And I think that realization is coming through in many different ways. We do have to wrap up this session and wrap up the entire after show. So I wanted to thank all of you, Andrew, Jared, Angela, and Rachel, for joining us today. And thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Amber.
And For everybody who has stuck with us for the past couple of hours, thank you so much for being here as well. It has been an absolute joy to work with all of the different team members in terms of putting this event together. There's different companies that have come together, different individuals, and it has really gone beyond any of my expectations. So it's been wonderful to be part of this. I do want to thank all of you who have joined us for the past couple of hours. If you enjoyed this show, most importantly, if you want to see more like this, it would be really wonderful if you could share this video with your friends and family on Facebook so they can also take a look, so that we're able to do more of these. Thank you so much for joining us today, and good luck with the future of work.
Yeah, this one's dedicated to everybody on hard times right now. This one's for you. Purpose, yeah, what's your purpose? Is it something deep or only on the surface? Does it drive you to always keep you working? Are you really living or out to make a living? Trying to survive by taking, not giving. What's your life mission? Are you on a path? Are you looking forward or slowly falling back? Wear it on your sleeve, feel it when you breathe. Your purpose keeps growing like the branch on a tree. Baby, can you see what it means to me? If I share it with you, will you join or let it be? Does it weigh you down or does it pick you up? A purpose is yourself, helping out when you stuck and never feeling down, dirty and depressed. Remember where you from, where you going, yeah, you blessed. And life will throw you curveballs, all times in stress. Loved ones dying, either dead or depressed. And it can be a mess, but you will pass the test. Sticking to your mission and giving it your best. Empty in the tank, give it all, nothing less. That's where I'ma be, and everyone will see the way I do it big, hold it down like a G. Taking care of friends, love, family. If you wanna do it, that's the way you gotta be. There's rules to this game, homie, ask a referee. And I know that it's tough right now, but baby, we can make it, make it. If you got a purpose, and we can keep on working this thing out. Yeah, I know that it's tough right now, baby, we can make it, make it. If we got a purpose, and we can just work it